Hamilton's Ferrari rotated cleanly through turn 3, the rear stepping just enough to tell the steering rack the truth. And then the lap time appeared, 16.3 seconds faster than expectation. Fastest of the week, but the timing screens told only half the story, because while headlines formed around a single lap, Ferrari's engineers were already looking elsewhere, at mileage deltas, compound usage, and a quieter signal hiding inside 4 days of uninterrupted running. Mercedes had arrived loud. Red Bull arrived experimental. McLaren arrived late. Ferrari arrived prepared. The mystery wasn't how Ferrari topped the times. It was why they were comfortable doing it at all. And the uncomfortable question lingering behind that final lap was this: did Ferrari finally learn how to start a regulation cycle, or did it just repeat history with better manners? Nothing about Ferrari's 2026 Barcelona test was supposed to end in headlines. They had openly admitted they would begin the year with a basic specification A car, designed not to explore performance but to prove reliability. They were coming off a winless 2025, exposed by an engine loophole they could not exploit while Mercedes and Red Bull could. Expectations were low by design, internally and externally, and for most of the week, Ferrari stayed exactly where it intended to be, invisible. While Mercedes dominated conversation with out-of-the-box mileage, Red Bull drew attention with its first true in-house power unit, and McLaren fought delays and fuel system issues. Ferrari simply ran. Lap after lap, stint after stint. Came the final day. Lewis Hamilton's late session run, the fastest of the entire test, completed what quietly became a sleeper arc. Ferrari didn't chase headlines early, it let them arrive accidentally. But here's the first key fact that matters. Even without that lap, Ferrari's test would have been judged a success. Multiple paddock whispers, cautiously framed, suggested Ferrari was viewed as second best overall, behind Mercedes but ahead of McLaren and Red Bull. That assessment was already in place before Hamilton's time. The lap didn't change Ferrari's position, it changed Ferrari's visibility. And that distinction matters deeply for a team with Ferrari's recent history, because in past seasons, Ferrari chased visibility first and understanding later. This time, the order appeared reversed. Hamilton himself framed it carefully. A solid first week, then immediately added, "We're under no illusions." That duality, satisfaction without celebration, is the first sign this test wasn't about speed. It was about control. But control only matters if it's real. And that's where the mileage numbers begin to speak. Ferrari did 440 laps in Barcelona, roughly 2,250 kilometers. That figure sounds impressive. And it is. But context matters. Mercedes ran the equivalent of half a day more, setting a benchmark for out-of-the-box reliability that no one matched. At this stage of a regulation reset, that gap is significant. Yet Ferrari still finished comfortably second in mileage. The next closest team, Haas, running Ferrari power, trailed well behind. The next non-Ferrari customer was over 100 laps or roughly 400 kilometers back. Red Bull and McLaren both lost nearly a full day due to unrelated incidents. And when you widen the lens to total power unit running across customer teams, Ferrari sits about 600 kilometers behind Mercedes, but nearly 2,000 kilometers ahead of everyone else. That is not a coincidence, that is infrastructure. This is where Ferrari's test begins to separate itself from past false dawns. In previous cycles, 2017, 2019, even early 2022, Ferrari showed pace early without robustness underneath it. Here, the robustness came first. Fred Vasseur described it simply: tons of laps, no real downtime. Hamilton echoed it more bluntly: we didn't really stop. Leclerc confirmed the intent: all the tests we wanted to do, we did. Ferrari completed over 100 laps and nearly 600 kilometers on day one, much of it in wet conditions despite being tight on parts. That matters. Wet running reveals correlation errors quickly. Ferrari didn't trip over them, even rival observers noticed. Williams team principal James Vowles, watching remotely because his own car wasn't ready, singled Ferrari out for consistency, ranking them just behind Mercedes in overall impression. But Vowles added the warning Ferrari fans know too well: the outright pace is still a question. And that warning isn't cynical. It's accurate, because Ferrari's headline lap came on a day Mercedes didn't run, and because testing lap times, especially in a fragmented shakedown, lie by omission. So Ferrari's real test wasn't speed, it was how and when they chose to show it. Ferrari's tire usage told a quieter story than the timing screens. On the first day, Leclerc ran just 19 laps on the medium compound. Hamilton spent most of his time on intermediates and full wets. No chasing grip, no chasing balance, just system checks. By Thursday, Ferrari settled into a pattern. The C2 medium became the workhorse. Hamilton ran extensive mapping and baseline work on C2, with limited sampling of the C1 hard. Leclerc mirrored the program. This was not a performance hunt, it was a correlation exercise. Then came the final day. Again, C2 dominated, but this time, both drivers briefly sampled the C3 soft, and the lap times jumped. Leclerc admitted as much, saying they pushed a little bit more to feel the limit. That wording matters. It wasn't an attack lap, it was a probe. Ferrari didn't discover speed, they confirmed it existed. This distinction is everything under new regulations. You don't want to find performance accidentally, you want to know where it lives, and how fragile it is. And that aligns with Ferrari's design choice. The car itself looked conservative, no extreme visual philosophy, no high-nose concept like Mercedes, nothing radical like Adrian Newey's Aston Martin interpretation. Ferrari locked in fundamentals early, cockpit position, front axle line, choices that cannot be changed later. That limits upside, but it also stabilizes development, which leads to the uncomfortable part. Ferrari's recent history with in-season development is mixed at best. Ferrari fans have seen this movie before. In 2017, preseason promise faded into strategic fragility. In 2019, raw pace masked a philosophical dead end. In 2022, a 46-point lead evaporated by round 6. Even as recently as late 2024, a strong constructors' surge set up a 2025 bid that collapsed before the season even began. This matters because Ferrari has already admitted something critical. They are counting on development in 2026. That is not comforting. Last season's floor and suspension changes failed to fix underlying issues. Ferrari stopped developing early to focus on 2026. A smart call. But it also means the team hasn't proven recently that it can reliably solve problems under pressure. Fred Vasseur acknowledged this indirectly, saying Ferrari has tons of open topics heading into Bahrain, and that correlation will be the most important metric. Correlation is Ferrari's real enemy, not speed. Barcelona gave them data. Bahrain will reveal whether they understand it. And the consequences go beyond lap time. Because 2026 isn't just a regulation reset for Ferrari, it's a crossroads. Charles Leclerc did not mince words last year. He called 2026 now or never. Privately, it's understood he believes the early phase of this regulation cycle will define the next 4 years, the length of his current commitment. By race 6 or 7, he expects the hierarchy to be clear. That puts enormous pressure on Ferrari's early interpretation. By Monaco, Leclerc's home race in June, the answers may already exist, and if they're negative, the long-term consequences extend beyond points. On the other side of the garage, Lewis Hamilton sounded different. After years of discomfort and ground effect machinery, he described the 2026 cars as more enjoyable, more oversteery, more alive. That enthusiasm wasn't just about Ferrari, it was about the regulations finally moving back toward his strengths. But Hamilton's situation is delicate. He has pushed internally for cultural and structural change. That leverage depends on credibility, and credibility depends on performance. Ferrari must prove it can unlock potential. Hamilton must prove his still exists. A competitive 2026 car simplifies everything. And for the first time in years, Ferrari's optimism feels measured. Ferrari did not win the Barcelona test. Mercedes did, but Ferrari passed a test that matters more. They behaved like a team that understands what testing is for. The mileage was real, the reliability was real, the restraint was real. Even the fastest lap, carefully timed, lightly leaned on, felt intentional rather than desperate. The data suggests Ferrari is not leading the field, but it may finally be leading itself. That does not guarantee success, History is brutally clear on that point, but it does change the starting conditions. And in Formula 1, starting conditions often decide everything. The answers now lie in Bahrain, in correlation, in whether Ferrari can turn learning into direction instead of noise, because speed can be found, trust cannot. So here's the question Ferrari can't avoid. If the 2026 car proves fundamentally competitive by race 6, but not dominant, does Ferrari finally stay disciplined and build forward? Or does the weight of its own history push it into chasing performance too early, too loudly, and too destructively? In other words, has Ferrari learned how to start a regulation era, or only how to survive 1 week of testing? That answer won't come from lap times, it will come from what Ferrari chooses to believe next.